So you and I know each other,
We,
but not everybody who's watching, listening,
yeah,
knows us. So let's just start
yeah,
with like some introductions.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Want to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. All right. So my name's Kavadas Marshall. Everybody calls me Q.
Yeah.
And I have the privilege of pastoring a church in Waterloo called Hope City Church. I'm a native. Born and raised here. You and I have that.
We are.
A lot in common. Been here my whole life. We lived a little bit away for a little bit in Kansas City, and then came back home about 7 years ago and planted the church.
Yeah. And so your people are watching and listening to us right now.
They are.
As are mine. So Jesse Tink, executive pastor at Prairie Lakes Church, where I've been for a long time. And we're in a series called Here's the Mic. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and the whole series for us anyways is how do we help just our people listen a little bit more, understand a little bit more from voices outside of the church. That's the whole premise of ours, right? So there have been some very difficult things that you and I both have felt as pastors, like we got to talk about this.
Yeah.
But they've been really hard to talk about.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited to talk to you about this, not just because of that, but because our contexts in some ways are similar, and in some ways they are very different.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's pretty obvious things on the surface level that we all know.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter the season, whether it's a pandemic or an election or you're in this part of the city or that part of the city, whatever, right? There's just some things that are hard to talk about. When you think about what's on your list there, what's the thing when they're difficult.
Yeah, I think one of the things is how do you pastor people toward life change, realizing that there are a lot of things shaping their identity and the way that they see themselves in the world, whether that's their political affiliation, whether that's their sexuality or identity, whether it's some cultural issue that they believe is really important. And not to minimize those things, but we are called to help people have Christ formed in them. I think, when I think about just the people just within our church and the church at large, as pastors, we're called to come alongside and help people see why. Yeah. Why is it better God's way? Yeah. Like, why is it better to interact in relationships, steward your finances, raise your children, make life decisions? Why is that better? Yeah. And I've got about a 30-minute slot on a Sunday morning to combat 8 hours a day on social media, the news feed, all of these things. Why is that important? Why is that important?
Right.
Because whoever has your ear is shaping your outlook.
Yeah. And I don't think people know that, right?
Right.
I mean, that's something that kind of happens in the background. Yeah. That maybe people wouldn't even say they're intentionally doing. Right. But they're mostly blind to it.
Coming out of this last 3 years as a pastor, I've become more aware than ever that these things are informing people. Yep. Like some people stopped attending because we didn't wear masks.
That's right.
Fast enough, or because we wore them too long.
I think you're spot on there. And I think, you and I are both in our early 40s. Yeah. And for my part, I mean, like I grew up in the church, and you were saved at an early age. You've been in the church, atmosphere for a very long time. We actually came to Jesus through similar traditions, even. Right.
That's right.
Kind of a really conservative, fundamentalist Baptist.
Oh, for sure.
Faith. So as we kind of journeyed as pastors and followers and brothers, for me, I became aware that I'm inheriting a mantle of pastoral ministry from a previous generation that did this differently than how you and I are having to do it. Yeah. Where, I think the dominant approach to some of these harder topics was either you don't talk about them because they don't belong in church and it's only going to make trouble, and let's just talk about Jesus. Right. Yeah. And other things that people like. Yeah. And you and I have talked about this too. I mean, like when that's your approach, what usually happens is you find a group of people that
Yeah.
all like the same thing,
Absolutely.
that all probably make similar kinds of money, that all
That's
maybe
right.
probably vote the same way.
That's
It's
right.
one of those outcomes. Like maybe you didn't set out to do it, but like that's what happens.
Yeah, that's right.
When it's like we don't talk about these things, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
there's never any sort of, you're kind of managing conflict out of the whole equation.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So that's one approach. The other approach
Yeah.
was you marry these things,
Oh man.
right?
Yeah.
And when I say marry them, it's either, I mean, politically left or right.
Oh, for sure.
You know, politically left
Oh yeah.
and your faith politically right. And we saw, I mean, I think in the last 3 years, more people left churches and joined churches, not on the basis of theology, even though they may kind of think that.
No.
It was on the basis of
Yeah.
masks, no masks.
Yeah. George Floyd, how'd you?
George Floyd,
Did you speak up? Did you not? Police, are you with them? Or are you against them?
That's right.
And
That's
it's
right.
very black and white thinking.
Are you making America great again?
Or are we trying to
Never him.
reimagine
Yes.
America?
Right.
You know,
right.
what is the narrative?
But people made decisions, fellowship decisions on the basis of, right?
Oh no. My father served in the military. We love the nation. It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But I think the question becomes, how can we be better citizens of heaven?
Yep.
And how does that influence the way that I see the Constitution and politics, and as opposed to letting that be the rudder of my decision making?
Yep.
Right. Well, I only if I am a kind of a Bible believing, kind of take the scriptures for what they mean. We're called to pray for our leaders. Like, am I praying for Biden, who's in now? Am I praying for Biden as much as I prayed for Trump? Mm-hmm. Or what we tend to do is go, God got his man when he got Trump. Or if you're a Democrat, God got his man when he got Biden.
Yeah.
But when the other team gets in, the devil got one in on us.
Yeah.
Like God stopped being sovereign all of a sudden.
Right. Because we're viewing our world
Yes.
through the lens of the things that are forming and shaping us,
That's right.
rather than potentially through the lens of
right.
God's word and God's truth, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, right? If I'm standing up front in Hope City,
Yeah.
like you do every single weekend, and I look out on the sea of Hope City people, what am I seeing?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a smattering of the valley. I think you're seeing people. We like to say that we're a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational church family. That's the bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Behind that, we're a socioeconomic. We are literally homeless people and millionaires in the same row, greeting on the same team.
Right.
We're also a multi-socio-political.
Yeah,
I don't
for
know
sure.
if that's how you describe it.
But yeah, explain.
Church. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit, like if we were to look at Hope City as a church, we would be a pretty purple church. We would be pretty purple. So it's always interesting. And so for us, I get the opportunity to lean into some of the political conversations as it relates to vote for who you vote for, but not at the expense of loving well your brother or sister in Christ, or even the community at large beyond the borders of our church. Partly, because I think we have to continue to remember that, at least in our context, when I look out, I go, man, the stuff you're saying on Facebook, just know that person's probably greeting you at the door. Mm-hmm. They're from that political party. Mm-hmm. And so we're multi-ethnic, multicultural, generational. It really is a smattering of people from all over.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously Prairie Lakes is different.
Yeah.
And most of our campuses, I mean, like our states is what it is.
Pretty vanilla.
Pretty vanilla.
Yep.
Mostly rural.
Yep.
And our campuses are the same. And so, I mean, as you and I were just chatting about the curious thing, and I kind of want to hear more from you. So like for us, because we dove into some of these things, right, that were forming and shaping.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes for us at Prairie Lakes, we assume that the person sitting next to us votes the same way, sees the world the same way, makes the same money, lives the same way. We assume,
right,
but it's not true.
Right.
It's not.
Why do you assume?
Because they look like me.
Right.
Because they look like me.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've had people that discovered that the person next to them.
Who'd you vote for?
And then they went immediately to what kind of church am I really a part of here?
Wow.
right? That's where they went.
Yeah.
Not the same
Yeah. Yeah.
for Hope City,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it was complicated to like navigate some of these issues, but for very different
Very different.
reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys still did, right? You still jumped into them.
Yeah. To a degree. Yeah. I think for us, it's difficult because it's easy to assume when everyone kind of looks the same, dressed the same. For us, I am very aware.
Yeah.
Whenever I say something, what kind of group of people are going to have issue?
Yep.
Because most of them, they look
Like they vote?
yes,
that what you're saying?
and different political parties, and they're on Facebook and they're pretty vocal. Facebook's giving everyone a microphone. So yeah, we waded into it, but I think we tried to do it wisely, like with George Floyd. I'm a black man. I don't know if anyone noticed, but I am black.
Huh.
So yeah, I was surprised this morning when I woke up.
It's news to me.
Yeah, I know. So when George Floyd happened, everyone had an opinion about how I should respond. So right, and so the minorities in our church wanted me to respond a certain way.
Yep.
People within the church who were aware of some of the dynamics as it relates to being a minority in America and just some of those dynamics, they wanted me to respond a certain way.
Yep.
Then I had another group of people who wanted me to respond a certain way. So I chose not to respond at all on Facebook. Partly because I don't like to be controlled.
Right.
And partly I think there's a time to speak. And I think there is, not only is there a right time to speak, but make sure the conversation's happening with the right people.
Yep.
And I think as we talk about this whole idea of this mic, like those conversations aren't best had over the airways. They're best had in this environment.
Yep.
At a table where we can understand, get context, and develop empathy, and in a safe space. Say hard things, which is one of the things I love about you, Jesse, is you have been a true friend. You've walked with me through some of my darkest life moments. And even as we've navigated, we've cried on the phone about some of this stuff, like what's happening in culture and how's the church responding. And that's the only way forward for us, brother, is we've got to drop the bullhorns and do a little bit more of this.
Yeah.
That's how we'll find each other.
I agree. Yeah. And there's a lot of forces in our culture that push us away from that.
Absolutely.
Right. Because you mentioned Facebook a couple times, or the media, or all these things that just kind of like put us away. So let's maybe go to the last leg of our conversation here. Okay. Because we haven't really gotten, we've gotten kind of practical.
Yeah.
But we haven't really gotten like super practical.
Right.
Okay. So how do we, not just as pastors, how do we as followers of Jesus talk about some of the difficult things? Because as I look at the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, however long God's got us here, I don't think it's going to get like less polarizing.
I would agree.
I don't think it's going to get less politically charged.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think our job is to try to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah.
And so, as you and I were chatting about this, the book that I've gone to, even in seminary, that I thought was super helpful to me was a guy named Richard Niebuhr.
Yeah.
But he wrote this book called Christ and Culture.
Yep.
Okay. And he's got several different ways in which the church has approached culture.
Yep.
And has assumed that maybe Jesus is like on their side as they do. And so let me just walk through
that's great.
some of this, and then like hear you as you go, and maybe even reflect back to me and the rest of us, like what parts of that does your church kind of embody? What parts of that does your church maybe push against? So the first one is like Christ against culture.
Yeah.
Now the church's posture here is culture is a broken, sinful, messed up place. Yeah. And we had better build a wall.
Yeah.
Is that too soon? Build a fortress. Put the barrier up. I don't know. More emails coming. More emails coming.
I love you.
They are. But there's rallying cries, right? The church should be pro
whatever.
Yes.
Or anti.
Yeah. So we're going to stand against marriage equality.
Police brutality.
We're going to stand against, or we're going to stand against
CRT.
defunding police.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Whatever it is,
Because button issues.
Yeah, because the world is nuts.
Yeah,
and the church is the place that is the whatever, right? And even as we're talking about it, a lot of times Christ against culture mentality gets translated primarily in political terms.
It's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Because I don't think it aligns with Jesus. Like there's when I think, here's what I think. I think when you define our approach in some of these hard things as against, I think you kind of have to jettison the things that Jesus is for that go across that line, right? So Jesus doesn't blur the lines between sin and
not at all
and truth,
not at all.
But he crosses that with his grace and his love.
He sure does,
right?
Aren't we thankful for that? But
if our posture, is against, then what happens inevitably is whoever's on this side of the line with me is for me, and whoever's on this side of the line is against me. I think that's why. And then so once you're on this side of the line, well then what do we all have in common here? Well, we all vote pro-choice.
Yeah, that's right.
We all vote big government or small government or whatever. That mentality. That's where that leads to.
We've been able to navigate that because we've led and we're trying to lead with what we're for, as opposed to being known for what we're against.
Yeah.
Now when I say against, again, we've got sin, the world, the devil. Those are three things that are seen as enemies of me being formed into Christ. I think what happens in this Christ against culture is that they say the world is culture. And I would say that's not true.
Right.
There are parts of the world that are beautiful, redemptive. Yes. God is in it. Education. There are parts even in our economy. There are good things.
That's right.
That Christ says, I can celebrate those
Culture
things.
is God's idea.
Culture is God's idea. Mm-hmm. That's right. And so we try to combat that on the front end to not deal with it as much on the back end.
Right.
You will get people who, whatever the issue is, we should stand up for, we should say something about, and you have to deal with that. And honestly, at times, it's been a generation of people who grew up at a time where the church has and still is seen as being the cultural warriors. We're fighting this cultural war. Yeah. But we try to remind them, Christ is doing something in me. Yeah. Before he's doing something through me. Right. And so I'm called to be a light, not a blowtorch to culture.
It's difficult, I think, to adopt this posture fully when Jesus says, love your enemies.
Very much so.
It's like impossible. Like, I don't know, how do you do that? Right. And our churches would really much align, I think, with the overall trajectory of our mission, which is out.
Oh, absolutely. Out. We are externally facing churches unapologetically.
So Christ against culture, not really.
No.
The next one he talks about when it comes to navigating some of these hard things, if we're not just supposed to be oppositional, the next option is Christ of culture.
Yeah.
Okay. And, if you adopt this posture, there really isn't any hard things to talk about. They're never hard because, you just embrace everything.
Yeah.
You just embrace everything.
No line of delineation.
No line of like Jesus is love. And so let's just love everybody.
Right.
And it's a really short throw from that to affirming whatever the culture affirms.
No, that's right.
And embracing whatever the culture, but they'll tie it, Christ of culture people will they'll tie it to this love, this idea of love.
Yeah.
Their definition of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. What do they do with the hard things that Jesus has to say?
That's probably the thing, because they don't probably talk about it very much.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll even sometimes, Christ of culture people will do kind of like cartwheels to work their way around that. Even like changing their belief around like, is the Bible authoritative or is it not? Is it inspired or is it not? Is it kind of a man-made book or is it God's word to us? And they'll kind of have to like change a little bit of what they think about that in order to accommodate this affirming view, right?
Yeah,
that's what they'll do. And so I'm guessing, as I'm by look on your face, Hope City's.
Oh no, we're not there at all.
Not that. Do you ever get accused of that?
No, I haven't. No, we've not been accused of that. No.
You never been accused of like being too soft?
So I've not been accused of being too soft as much as it's been say more about the negative effects of
right
these things,
right?
Or tell people that they're sinners.
Yeah,
they need to know that they're sinful.
Yeah,
I go, man. They woke up this morning and fought on their way to church. They're aware.
Yeah,
they're aware.
Yep.
And so the Bible does. The Bible calls sin.
The Bible is really clear about sin, right? But
Yeah.
I would challenge people. I mean, because Pastor John, our senior pastor, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The interaction that Jesus has, with people, because there's a ton of them, almost 100 of them in the Gospels that we have.
Well,
he almost never leads with, "You are screwing up your life."
Right. That's right.
Now he never backs off that either in the conversation. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
But he never leads. He doesn't ever really seem with that. It's like,
who
do you think I am?
Yeah, that's right.
What do you need?
That's right.
What are you asking me?
That's right. That's right.
Do you believe?
That's right.
I mean, these are the things that he leads with.
Yeah.
And then when he needs to, he'll say like, "Go and sin no more."
Right.
Don't make me an arbiter between you.
Yeah.
Those kinds of beware of.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the kind of that middle group of people, Christ of culture, they emphasize the front half without acknowledging the back half.
That's right.
Which is at times our sin gets us into hairy predicaments. Number 1, 2.
It does.
God is a judge. He is not taken off his judge hat.
Yes, he is.
But man, he's a compassionate judge.
I agree that Jesus is loving, but there is a reason that Jesus died.
There is a reason.
Right?
There is a reason.
I mean, if we're going to say that Jesus is loving in the most clear way with him outstretched arms on the cross, there's a reason that he died.
The question is why.
The question is why, right?
That's right.
We can't be affirming of everything that culture affirms, because then we're going to affirm the same things that Jesus says, "I'm dying for this. God's against this, and I'm going to take the penalty for you."
Yeah, I remember there was there was someone who identified as a different gender than the one that they were born with. Mm-hmm. And they were attending and getting loved on. I mean, just getting loved on. And the kind of the headline became in a meeting to me, aren't we going to say something? And I said, well, you want me to say something about your sin? Because I know them. Mm-hmm. You want me to handle your sin the same way that you want me to handle theirs? And so it was a great coaching opportunity to say that people are welcome to belong before they believe. Yep. Number 1, welcoming and affirming are 2 different conversations. Yep. 3, I trust God at work in them as we hold out the gospel of truth. Yes. I've got confidence in God and his ability to shape and change and form us, no matter what the thing is, whether it's an eternal thing or a visible thing that everyone sees. I think sometimes we say we trust the power work of the Holy Spirit, God's word, but sometimes we kind of assume we should help him out a little bit.
I've got to convict you.
Yeah, I've got to be the one. And I just don't know. Even to your point, Jesus was the harshest with the religious leaders. I mean, people who were broken, very tender, all of the whitewashed tomb, sons of Satan, pit of vipers. That's all the people who were insiders
and wanted to get hard on sin,
and who were unwilling to embrace outsiders.
Yeah.
They got it wrong. They just got it wrong.
Okay, so I think we're both we can probably dismiss the Christ against, even though there's parts of that are kind of redemptive. We can dismiss the Christ of, even though there's maybe elements of truth in that. But really, like the third and final one, this is probably where we find a mixture of in our churches is Christ above culture. As we're navigating some of these hard things, an approach might be Christ of culture, and this can look a few different ways. Okay, so Christ above culture, there's like a synthesis way to approach, meaning all truth is God's truth. Okay, all truth is God's truth, and so let's take our cues and like learn from both. So masks, okay,
sure.
What part of that seems to be kind of just good scientific practice,
Right.
and what parts of this is kind of more like human fear, you know?
Yeah, right.
And synthesis would say, hey, don't do this. Take the
Yeah.
good in both and stay above
Yeah.
the fray.
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
great
one
explanation.
approach.
That's great explanation.
Christ above culture. The other way this kind of gets worked out is in like a paradox, meaning in some of these hard things, what you're going to see is brokenness, sin has worked its way in. And that's why it's so loaded. That's why it's so polarized. That's why it's so hateful. That's why people are.
Yeah.
And we're not going to remain out of the fray.
Right.
But what we're going to understand is our posture is to go into that
Yeah.
with the grace and the love and the mercy and the message of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a paradox, meaning like I want to stay out of it, but not out of it.
Yeah.
I don't want to get wrapped up in it, but I want to reach
Yeah.
those people with the message of Jesus. That's
Yeah.
paradox. And then the final way that this kind of gets worked out, Christ above culture and some of these hard things, is as a transformer. Christ is a transformer of culture.
Yeah.
So let's go back to like George Floyd.
Okay.
Okay. Is this an issue of police brutality?
Yeah.
Is this an issue of racism?
Yeah.
Is this an issue of, fill in the blank?
Yeah.
Or is it all of the above? And ultimately one day Jesus is going to make it so that we won't have these problems
Yeah.
anymore. But the pathway to that is the one that we're on right now, where we might need to start talking about, as a church, racial reconciliation. We might need to talk about Christian community development. We might need to talk about systemic racism. We might need to talk about we might need to talk about powers and principalities, so that by the time Jesus comes back, we are being transformed and we're starting to operate in a way that we will one day operate. Okay.
How is that different from the paradox of I have to speak out?
Paradox people would go, George Floyd's a great example of this. And I don't, when I say that, I'm going to be careful. Like George Floyd's also a person here. Like it was not an issue. But I think for our conversation here, it's just a helpful insight.
Yeah.
Paradox people would say, look at that story and say, oh, Jesus,
Fix it.
I can't wait until you return and we don't have to. And they're not saying it completely dispassionate and
Sure.
but it's like Jesus, it's like the gospel is like the magic key for that. And there's not really a call for some of the paradox people to kind of jump into the ways that the gospel might need to get worked out.
Okay.
In that, it's
great.
I wish that, what if that cop knew Jesus and George Floyd knew Jesus, that would be different.
Sure.
And I would go like, yes, but also what else? Like what's our job in some of that? Paradox people, the gospel is the skeleton key.
Got it.
Transformers is like, no, it's not just heaven later.
Yep. Yeah. That's great. That's super
So,
great.
so synthesis.
Yeah.
We gotta, it's kind of a both and. Paradox. We gotta run to a broken world with the message of Jesus. Transformer.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of that, like kingdom later, but also now.
Yeah.
Jesus is going to fix everything eventually, but we're in a process where the kingdom is now near, and we got to start operating differently in these systems, even these broken systems right now, putting a different picture on display. When you're planning a message, okay, synthesis would be, let's make it a both and.
Yeah.
Let's grab this and let's grab the truth here and let's not. That would be your kind of posture. If you're a paradox person, it's woe is me, woe is this world, but Jesus loves this world, so let's not hate it, but it's really broken, and one day it's gonna be. Transformer would be, here's the ways in which we're gonna live as people in God's kingdom in a way that's often countercultural, relies heavily upon Jesus's intervention, and is a picture of one day things to come.
Yeah.
So which of those, when you go to plan a message, are you more likely to like embrace.
Yeah. Theologically, philosophy to ministry would be for sure the third one.
Yeah.
We are people here on mission, sent by Jesus to fulfill the work of Jesus in every way in which we can. Again, I think there's an individual and a corporate manifestation of it. Individually, if God answered every one of my prayers, would my life be the only one that's changed?
Say that one more time.
Yep. If God answered every one of my prayers, would my life be the only life that's changed?
Okay. And we're just going to pause and we're going to let the people that are hearing that, because that was beautiful.
Yep.
Okay. So we've created space for people to kind of wrap their mind around that question. And the answer to that question is the right answer. The right answer is what?
Is no.
No.
Yeah.
What else would change?
Yeah. I would say two things. That wasn't meant to be an accusation, but an antidote.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
There's two things Jesus swept over: people and places. And so what we want is the heart of Jesus. We're just going back to Jesus being formed in us. Jesus, what do you love? What do you see when you see humanity? What matters to you? God, if you're a father, what do you care about? How can I love the things that you love? Like, how can I care about those things? So one of the easiest ways is to pray, not as an excuse for action,
right?
But the first response to action is to pray. Pray. Okay. I believe if you will be honest in prayer, even if it's, God, I don't know what to say. Teach me what to say. I think naturally ideas and opportunities out of his goodness will come. I'm just talking about as an individual.
I'm tracking.
Out of his goodness, ideas and opportunities will come to you for you to be the answer to your own prayer. Okay? That's how the kingdom works. That's how the Father works. That's how he fathers us.
God's not just calling you to heaven one day.
No.
He's calling you to love today.
Yes.
And some uncomfortable ways.
Yeah.
Ways that go beyond my little sphere.
Yeah, I don't think life makes sense until you start making a difference in the life of someone else. Mm-hmm. I think we are robbing ourselves. So organizationally, I think I would feel as if I'm robbing people the true experience of what it means to be a Christian, to not call them to action.
Yep. That is probably, I think it's very well said. And I think it does remind us that as many of the pitfalls and as many of the polarizing and loaded and all of the things we used to describe the last 3 years and probably the next several, every single one of those with this kind of mindset presents an opportunity
That's good.
for us to point everybody to our underlying need.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
That's right.
But if we don't have that mentality,
right,
we're going to miss out on that opportunity.
And
we won't.
Yeah.
We'll fall right back into the systems that are not going to ultimately change or transform anybody.
Right.
So, okay, my friend, I'm grateful for you. I love you.
Man. I love you too, man.
I respect you quite a bit, man.
Yeah.
I admire you.
Yeah, it's mutual. You know, it's mutual.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I'm really grateful for you. Thanks for spending some time.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to get our churches together.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.